Okay, evaluating truth, fiction, and everything in between. There's just almost too much material from the last few weeks to cover here, but I'm going to do my best. You see, I have a bunch of tabs open. I had about 20 more tabs open a minute ago, just pulling everything together. This is on purpose. I want to show you some of these tabs. So I'm going to check chat from time to time. Um, if you um, if you have burning questions, drop them in there. I don't know that I can't promise that I'm going to have time to get to all the questions just because we do have a lot of participants, but I'm going to talk today about how to navigate breaking news in the age of AI and a noisy information environment. And this webinar is really designed for everyone. We have an educator webinar series coming up next week. If you're an educator, even if you're not and you're just interested, you're welcome to join that as well. Just go ahead and register. All right, let's go right into it. Today we're going to discuss today's information environment, just a quick little overview. Some overall principles and best practices for navigating breaking news, and we'll weave these in throughout all of our examples. And the most fun part is the examples. So today's information environment, you're probably familiar. That's how you found out about this webinar with our company, Ad Fontes Media, and the media bias chart that we are famous for. This is our most recent version of our flagship media bias chart, which was released in January. And keep your eyes peeled because we have a new version, a new flagship version that we're scheduling to release next week. So you come to our site to download that. But things to notice about it. There are thousands of news sources. They vary in size and reliability and bias. So there are news sources at the top and in the middle that are big and small. Like you don't have to be established for a long time or a large outlet in order to be highly reliable. At the same time, being big and established for a long time doesn't necessarily make you reliable either. You can be lower on the chart, further left or right, etc. But in today's news environment, we have individual reporters at these news sources, like these news outlets, writers who are not necessarily reporters, like opinion columnists, content creators, and influencers, creators of podcasts, etc. And they tend to share their information not only on their primary platforms, such as a podcast or a TV show or YouTube or the paper that they write for, but they also share this information on social media. So we really get our information from a lot of different places. And there's a lot of overlap between the sources that are on here and the voices that you hear tweeting this stuff out or posting it on Threads or Facebook or TikTok or YouTube or whatever. So some overall principles and best practices, especially when it comes to breaking news. Here's our first set of overall principles and best practices. One, your goal should be to gauge the likelihood of veracity, especially before speaking publicly about a claim. All right, so that part about especially before speaking publicly about a topic or a claim, let's dive into that a little bit more. And the next principle is really prioritizing accuracy over speed. It's best to wait. And the bigger your audience, the greater your responsibility to verify accuracy before sharing information or weighing in with your opinion. And this is really easy to ignore in today's information environment, especially if you're the kind of person who's active on social media. So why I say before speaking publicly about a topic or a claim is because of the third principle. We all have some sort of audience. Your audience might only be like your friends and family and just people you talk to in real life if you're not somebody who shares stuff on social media. But if you are somebody, even if you don't have, you say you like have just a sort of a normal online presence, maybe like Facebook or Instagram, and you share like content from your just from your life, you have some sort of following. You have your friends that are on there. The things you say, you are saying out there to an audience. Some have much bigger followings. So the bigger it and that expands from to people who have like moderate to large followings, to people who could be considered influencers, to people who are, journalists. There's a ton of folks. The size of audience really varies a lot. But let's drill down a little bit on this likelihood of veracity concept. Why are we talking about likelihood? Why aren't we just talking about like just truth? Is it true or false? Is it true or is it a lie? Well, the deal with information on the internet, or any information really, is that it's truly rare when we can be 100% certain that something's true or false. And if you go back to epistemology and philosophy 101, philosophers have wrestled with how you can truly know what's really true, like with 100% certainty. For the most part, you can't, but we want to be comfortable with the fact that even if we can't be 100% certain of what's true, the truth, we can reasonably sort out what's likelier to be true and likelier to be false. And there's things that we can be 90% certain, or 80% certain, or 50-50. There's like those differences in gradients. We want to get comfortable with the fact that some things we can have 90+% confidence on, that they're true or false. And we can't just throw up our hands and say, we don't know what's true. We do have to decide. We do have to like make decisions based on what we and make bets on what is more likely. So in our own evaluation of reliability, we have an internal methodology for determining the likelihood of veracity for any particular claim that we come across, that our analysts come across in a newspaper article or a podcast or a TV show. And those steps are pretty simple. One, it's determine if you have reason to question the veracity of a statement or a claim, like putting your flags up. Two, this is so dead simple, but I'm going to keep coming back to it over and over, is look it up. Look it up. Look it up in a search engine. Literally Google it. I don't recommend asking ChatGPT for it, or any other generative AI for it, because they can give you wrong answers quite frequently with confidence that makes them sound right. But look things up. It's just not a natural mechanism for most people, because when you come across news, especially on social media, it's easy. The buttons there are, some version of like or share or like repost with a quote. There's no like look it up function. You have to like open up a new browser to type in the thing that you want to verify and look it up. But it does you so many favors. When you look things up, you get varying results based on what you entered as a search. So you want to sort the kinds of results that you get mentally into like high quality, medium, and low quality sources of corroboration of the thing you're looking for. Generally, like highly reliable news sources would be high types of high quality corroboration. But when you're just finding medium or low value sources of corroboration, can give you reason to question the veracity of what you looked up in the first place. Follow the links and read further on high quality corroborating sources. This is why you need to sort them in the first place into like high, medium, and low. Look for the best source that you're familiar with to dive deeper into the question. And you may find competing information. That happens all the time, but we are able as humans to weigh the relative credibility of conflicting information. We do it all the time. Okay, let's get into some of these examples. All right, so this is somewhat chronological, these examples that I'll give that we're going through over the last, I think, 4 or 5 weeks in American politics. So seems like a long time ago now, but Trump survived an assassination attempt, and there was lots of inaccurate information in the immediate aftermath of that. So one thing I thought was really fascinating is that some folks, especially on social media, who have like an anti-mainstream media posture, complained about big news outlets being slow to confirm significant information. So here's an example. Like this person on X said, they took a screenshot of Washington Post because the Washington Post headline said Trump rushed off stage after loud noises at rally. And then here's look at the caption here. Like, you don't hate the media enough. Like, you should hate the media because they're not telling you like the truth or whatever is like the underlying claim. However, it's really important for a big outlet to get a really, really important fact correct. And it's more important to get it correct than to put it out fast. Remember when I said prioritize accuracy over speed? So think about, you have a responsibility with your small audience to, to be accurate. The Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, they have a much, much bigger responsibility because if they publish something that's not true, then that's a big deal. So like publishing exactly only what you know at the time is actually really prudent. You should want your reliable news sources to wait a beat, wait a few seconds, and only write the things that they can definitely verify. Okay. So let me back up just a second and talk to you about like my mental thought process when I first saw the footage of Trump having been shot, and like we find out later like he was shot and rushed off stage, and like we find out more details later. But when it happened, like there's only limited information that you have. They kept replaying this video over and over, and it was like you could hear some noises, you could like see him like go down to the ground and like wince, and then you can see there's like a little scuffle. Secret Service comes in, and then they like bring him over, and he like says his thing, and then they take him off to a car. Like they just showed that over and over. And like everybody, I had questions. I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? And it's totally normal to have questions when you don't have the information. Like you want to start piecing together, like based on what you have, what's happening here. And you can like hypothesize or conjecture when you don't have a lot of information. Like one of the things I thought right away was like, well, seems like he wasn't hurt too bad. He's like, seems like he's got his cut on his ear. And, those noises didn't seem very loud to me. Was it like a BB gun or something? This is what I thought in my head. Okay. These are the questions that like everyone has these sorts of questions. It would have been super irresponsible of me to just ask those questions out loud on social media to like hypothesize and conjecture because I didn't have any information that like my I wonder if it's a BB gun thought was like even plausible. So like I didn't write anything. Just you can do that. You could just not say anything because you don't know and you don't have the information. I was just like, well, I guess I'll just wait to find out. And we found all the information over time. So what happened? But people love to just like put their hypotheses on the internet. And this is one of the things that happens when you do rush. Okay, so there were a few outlets that published and republished some reporting that said, Donald Trump was hit by glass from a shattered teleprompter, not a bullet, according to sources. And then, a version of that appeared in MSN, in Newsmax, in Raw Story, in a few other outlets that were, like fairly big and like have their big websites that have big followings. And it turned out to not be true, and it shouldn't have been published by those outlets in the first place. Many major news outlets did not publish such a thing because they couldn't independently verify it. And the reason why is because these stories were actually like the published articles online were actually based on unverified tweets. So this is actually a Newsmax reporter, and Newsmax ended up like publishing this article, and it's still up to this day. They've like not corrected it. That this one that I showed you right here is still up. so is that MSN one, by the way. Raw Stories corrected their original reporting on that. Um, but a Newsmax uh, reporter was on the ground. An Axios reporter also was on the ground and tweeted that too, right? The Axios reporter later deleted her tweet. And the reason that other outlets didn't just, look at the unverified tweets and republish them is because like this is sort of a major fact. Like you would want to make sure that you could verify it independently if you're going to go ahead and publish such a thing. Because what happened with this, like just enough credibility in the large websites having re-reported it, there was quite a bit of confusion about the underlying truth of that. It had the effect, here we go. These had the effect of giving the early report a lot more credibility than it ever should have. Sorry for the sizing here, but this first transcript here that I'm showing you, this is from the New York Times podcast, The Daily. And in the middle, like this is a whole podcast about like evidence, like there's a photo taken by a New York Times reporter that showed a bullet. It was likely a bullet grazing like past Trump's head. But in the middle of this transcript, it says, and do we know for sure it was a bullet that hit him? And it says that's a little bit ambiguous. There were some reports that he was injured by a flying glass from a teleprompter, but in a Truth Social post, he said he was shot by a bullet. And in a conference call today with the FBI, they refused to address the issue at all. And that makes it sound a little bit more ambiguous than it was. It's really not ambiguous at all. Here, let me just pull up this Snopes article on it real quick. Here, Snopes teleprompter glass shards Trump. Okay, so this, that initial reporting was false, and you know what, based on what was the evidence that was available at the time, the reports should have known that the writer should have known that it was false. One of the major like the major things was that like you could see right here, like this was the image that we all watched live like over and over and over 50 times. Like in order for like glass shards specifically from a teleprompter specifically to have like hit him in the ear, you would need to have shattered teleprompters. And here it's like boop boop, there's like two intact teleprompters right there. So there's the fact that this people rushed to judgment on it. Even days later, like here's Michael Steele on MSNBC said there are a lot of questions around that year. Mediaite, this is an article from Mediaite that says he flirts with Trump shooting conspiracy theories in bizarre commentary. All right. Okay, let's move on to another example. Oh wait, no. Okay, second set. Sorry for the order of this. Okay. Overall principles and best practices, second set. Let's recognize when information sources present speculation instead of evidence. When you see news outlets or information sources saying things like, well, it just doesn't add up, or it just makes sense, like they're providing like logical arguments rather than evidence, you should have your guard up. When they pose a lot of questions in a row, that's a rhetorical device. Just asking questions is a rhetorical device. What just asking questions as like a trope is when you ask this rhetorical question, like, well, why wasn't it this? It makes the reader or the listener assume that the answer is something negative, that they didn't say, that they didn't have evidence for. And the related principle is that like there's nothing wrong with questions. Like I said, I went through like a litany of questions in my head when I saw this assassination attempt. That's where reporting starts. It starts with a question, but the actual reporting itself should be the answers to that question. When people just publish questions, that's not news. That's not journalism. It's not reporting. So let's dive into this example. Biden dropped out of the presidential race, and like the information on some websites was like, well, maybe he's dead. And, some people believe this for a short period of time. Maybe he's dead, just asking questions. This article is from a outlet called American Spectator. It says, believe nothing about Biden's resignation and don't give him any credit, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to pull up the actual article itself. And there's a lot of, anti-Biden bias here. But let's jump in here in the middle. He basically says, the Democrats and so-and-so are a bunch of liars. And he says, if they say the sky is blue, we'd better see some verification. Like whatever the Biden and the Democrats have to say, not to be trusted. And he says, and there's no verification as of this writing, more than 24 hours after the fact, that Joe Biden has quit the 2024 race of his own volition. So they're like demanding proof that he did this out of his own volition, even though there's no evidence that shows that he didn't. They're trying to shift the burden of proof from the thing that's likely to the thing that's unlikely. All we've been given is a letter supposedly written by Biden, but only equipped with a digital signature and not on presidential letterhead, which was released on Biden's X account that everyone knows he isn't in charge of. Okay, so it sounds like evidence, but it's actually not evidence. There's no actual evidence like this is a fake letter, like written by somebody else that wasn't Biden, that it was tweeted out by somebody like not under his control, right? So it sounds like evidence, but there's no actual evidence. It's just plausibility. All right, tradition indicates that something as dramatic, historic, and consequential as a sitting president refusing to run for re-election would be announced at a live press conference. So, like they're using as proof, like a logical argument or like a intended logical argument that that if this were real, this would have been announced at a press conference. Again, sounds like evidence, but it's not. So, or at least via a televised address to the nation, or perhaps a video statement, or in a phone interview. So they're putting out a bunch of like hypotheticals, again, without presenting evidence that Joe Biden did not do this out of his own volition. So let's see. You're welcome to believe that if you want. Here's another possible interpretation. This is from Charlie Kirk, who's a strong right influencer, has a podcast, some media sources. I received multiple emails like this confirming many elements of the story. That there was a plan that changed abruptly, and they got him on AF1 very quickly. Like something about maybe Biden was like rushed to a hospital or something. And it says, yes, Laura Loomer, who is even less credible because of past statements that she's made that are false on the internet. This is even like admission that like, yeah, we know like Laura Loomer is not like the most credible. Has Charlie Kirk corroborated it? Are either of them less credible than the people in charge of Joe Biden's X account? Again, these are all just questions. Still like a lot of sentences and zero evidence. So we all know that like a few days later, Joe Biden like did an Oval Office address and was not dead. And there's still been no evidence that he didn't quit the race of his own volition. We've heard from him in interviews since then. And it's just but it's funny that like during this window of time, there's like a 2-3 day period between when he announces on Sunday and then when he had made his Oval Office address, where there's a bunch of stories like this from like, serious outlets, like, I don't know, just asking questions, maybe he's dead. So the way to identify that is by looking for these kind of tropes, looking for this, just asking questions or like just presenting a logical argument in lieu of evidence. All right, isn't this fun? I'm having fun. Okay, let's do some other examples. All right, other overall principles and best practices for evaluating information on the internet. Beware of claims that confirm your bias in a highly satisfying way. False claims that have very specific information are actually really easy to fact check, but they're also very easy not to fact check. Jokes and lies are both very powerful in our political discourse. The effect of jokes and lies are that they are both really terrible arguments for convincing people who are on your opposite. Oh, sorry, the screen is blank. I just unshared for just a second. I'm gonna put it back up. Okay. Let me go on to our next example. All right. Overall principles and best practices. Here's the fourth set. All right. Don't get your facts from memes and posts. That seems pretty straightforward, but it's not. When you see people fighting over facts on social media, go look up the actual story from one or more reliable news sources. We can't have a real discussion about issues when we don't share common facts. So let's talk about this example of Algerian boxer Imani Khalif. Here are a couple of memes that I saw. I saw this one on the left, this "I'm with her" one, quite a bit on Facebook. And then here's a more like explicitly false one. It says, "This is so heartbreaking to watch. Female boxer quits Olympic bout against biologically male opponent and breaks down in floods of tears after a brutal 46 seconds." So whenever I saw, like, especially this I'm with her one posted on Facebook, it was like so engaging. It was, people just rushed in to comment and often rushed in with a particular orientation to the underlying facts. One, they just didn't like know the facts. So this claim that the Imani Khalif is biologically male, all available evidence points to that being false. She was born a woman. There's like there are claims that she may have XY chromosomes or elevated testosterone, but to claim that she's categorically a biological male based on the available evidence is false. She's also not transgender. So, but people would read this and come to the conclusion that either she is male or she's transgender, even if it didn't say that in there, and she's participating in a women's sport, and then have like arguments and discussions around that. So they would just like not know the facts. Some people would come to the argument knowing like very specific but very wrong facts. So you can imagine that like people you can the term like biologically male or like transgender, about like what that can mean about somebody's like physiology. I heard people claiming like without any citations or without anything that's like a credible corroboration, like, well, I heard she has testicles in her stomach. I was like, where did that come from? So people would like strongly believe wrong facts that there's like no credible evidence for. The third posture that folks would come to with it is like maybe they did know the underlying facts, but they sort of ignored them and just wanted to make their overall point known, or their overall position known about trans people in sports. Like if you're arguing about like whether trans women should participate in female sports, then you wouldn't necessarily need to like this wouldn't be applicable because this person is not trans, like she's not gone through a transition at any point in her life. Okay, so if you uh, in order to like make sense of these arguments on Facebook, like it it doesn't make any sense to just like read through the comments, because you would get really, really, really misinformed by just reading the comments back and forth. And even people defending Imani Khalif would like come to the table with their own misinformation, just from like what they had heard from reading other people's social media comments. So it's really easy to just like stay wrapped up in the social media world and say, well, I heard in that comment over there, and I heard in that comment over there that actually she has this syndrome. Actually, her testosterone levels were this. And I was like, all right, well, I need to like go and find out like what the whole deal is. So let me like go and Google it and find reputable sources on it. So the trouble with this, and why a lot of people struggle with the facts of this case, is because it's a really fact dense story. Let me sort of try to summarize the short version of it. There, actually, let me not. Go and read it for yourself. There are multiple governing bodies of boxing, including like this International Boxing Association and the IOC. And there are facts about, gosh, I'm trying to let me go back to what I initially said I was going to do. All right, so Imani Khalif has participated in boxing competitions for many years. There is a boxing governing body called the International Boxing Association that governs some things, but the IOC, International Olympic Committee, doesn't recognize that organization because for a bunch of other reasons. They said that they have issues with governance and corruption and stuff like that. And so the IOC and the IBA have their own like rules for who can compete in women's competitions. And previously, not in this year's Olympics, the IBA has disqualified Imani Khalif and another boxer from Taiwan because they said that they failed certain gender tests. And there's some like some disputed reporting about what the nature of the failing of the test was. There are some reports that say Imani Khalif has XY chromosomes. There are other reports that say she had elevated testosterone levels, but it's not known under which like she was disqualified for this other boxing competition, 2023 World Championships. But the IOC, they're like, you know what? The IBA, we got a lot of problems with them. We think their tests are really inaccurate. We have our own tests. We're not really going to talk about what they are. But this boxer has like met both the boxers who are competing in this Olympics have met our qualification standards. They're born women, and like here's all of our other criteria, and they're competing rightfully. So that's a lot of facts. It took me like 3-4 minutes to walk through all of those. And you know what? In order to find out those facts, I had to read like 4 articles about it. It was kind of a lot. What's easier, looking at this meme or like reading 4 articles with all the facts and trying to keep the different boxing associations in your mind and trying to weigh all the evidence about the various like credibility of their tests and the people who brought them forward? It's kind of hard, but it's sort of important, because if we don't share a common set of facts, then we can't have like real discussions about policy. Like I think it's a appropriate conversation, like a question to say, under what circumstances can a person participate in female sports? Like there's a discussion to be had around it. But if you don't have the actual facts, then you're just talking past that real issue. Okay, so people can get duped even if they are, professionals or they have big followings, etc. So the Boston Globe, like they made a big whoopsie. Like they wrote the title "Transgender Boxer Advances." oh, there's no evidence that she's transgender whatsoever. And this is actually an article that was written by the AP. Greg Beecham, Associated Press. So if you're not familiar, the AP writes stories and then they sell them to newspapers all over the world who can reprint them. Now, they have to have like the byline for the author and the Associated Press, but the news outlet can change the headline. And they did. And the word transgender isn't anywhere in the article, but maybe the editor or the person who wrote the headline, like they sort of saw something floating around on the internet and made the assumption that it was an issue of her being transgender without digging into the facts. Whoops. So they did that in the print edition, and then they had to take it down and change it and apologize. So, real easy to mess up. And when this is such a politicized issue, when people like really want to make like score political points about something that's very, very contentious in the United States, JD Vance, Charlie, retweeting Charlie Clerk, really doubling down on, she is a biological man, without, to the extent they dug into the factual underpinnings of the case. I am not giving a lot of benefit of the doubt that they did so. But Riley Gaines tweet, Elon Musk retweeting it, just really easy for folks to be like, I see this information on the internet. I have these preconceived notions. I am going to make a statement about it. All right, so let's see. We do have some good questions in this chat, and I think I will leave some time for them. Let me show you one more thing before I get to some questions, and that's about a story that's not super political, but it's here. I'm going to stop sharing for a second before I jump into it. Let me describe to you a story that didn't get a ton of attention because, again, it's not overtly political. There was a story about 6 weeks ago that said the U.S. and Saudi Arabia had an agreement that was going to expire, and nothing was replacing this, which meant that the U.S. petrodollar was going to be no more. Petrodollar, if you're wondering, if you've never heard that term, it's generally like the concept that like oil is traded in dollars and not like other currencies. And so a few accounts popped up online. So they're like, this is the biggest story. Why is nobody talking about it? This means the end of the dollar as like the controlling currency. This is a really big deal. Why isn't the media talking about this? Turns out the media is not talking about this because it's like not a true thing. There's no like agreement that expired. It's just not, it just wasn't true in any sense. So it sort of ricocheted around the internet very similarly to the whole teleprompter glass shards story. Like there was some questionable reporting on it, and then like a more reputable outlet wrote that, and then like a more reputable like big website, I think in this case, MSN and NASDAQ.com, like they just republished the article from like the lower quality source, and people are like, well, it's on MSN, it's on NASDAQ.com. I think maybe it's true. So it ricocheted around the internet, and only people who like would follow this kind of oil markets and currency markets really closely would have paid attention to the story. But when we were researching the different news outlets that were re-reporting it, I came across this one that I thought was really fascinating. Let me pull that up here. Okay, because I was Googling stories about the US petrodollar, and I came across this website. It's not one I had heard of, metalsedge.com. The Prince of Saudi Arabia decides not to renew the petrodollar agreement. So I'm like, oh, let me just read this story and see, is this any original reporting? Is this like a source that's familiar with the oil markets or finance or in the Middle East? Because it's from Treasure Coast Bullion Group, seems to have something to do with finance. But it says the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has made a monumental decision. And at this point, I already knew that this was false. I'm like, what's up with this article? So as we start reading it, and we look at the pictures, I actually looked at this with one of my analysts. And as soon as we scrolled past this initial picture, which seems like, I don't know, a picture of the Saudi Arabian flag. And yeah, if you hover over it, hopefully you see my little caption. The Saudi Arabian flag hangs limply in the wind as the prince's decree is announced, signaling the end of the petrodollar agreement. Um, one of my analysts was like, that's not the Saudi Arabian flag. Wait, what? Hold on. Let's Google that. Saudi Arabian flag. All right, that's the images. Oh man, hold on. Let's look at this previous one. Okay, so there's like this crescent, like that's not the same flag at all. There's some like Arabic writing. There's a straight sword, not a curvy sword. And um, what's with like why is it square? Why does it have these ruffles? There's this thing on top. I don't think those are even real words at this point. What is this? This is an AI generated image. There's a no caption on it too. There's like no photo credit. And so like you keep scrolling. If you didn't notice that one, you might notice like if you look closely, and you do want to look closely in this age of like AI generated images. So brief tangent, but we want to talk about like being able to spot AI generated images. So I'm like, yeah, it seems a little like perfect and glossy until you look closely. And I'm like, why is one side of his mustache up and the other side down? And that just seems like a lot of extra fingers. Why is he drinking like a green tonic out of this bottle? And something's wrong with this microphone. Also, this is supposed to be like the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Um, this seems like princely outfit, but like I know like I've seen pictures of the Saudi Crown Prince. I don't think this is that guy. Let's look that up. Oop, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Yeah, that's not the same guy. This is just some generic AI Saudi prince. And then all the rest of the pictures are like, here's more Saudi prince picture, maybe. All these are all AI generated. Fun stuff. Okay, I'm gonna stop and take some questions. We have at least one in the chat. It says, how do you deal with someone who doubts all facts because it's a global conspiracy? The only facts that are reliable to him is Newsmax and some social media. Yeah, that's super frustrating. So, there are people who are reachable and there are people who are not. And sometimes you don't know where that line is. Sometimes it's like really clear, like nothing I say is going to make a difference. But I think we dismiss people a little too quickly sometimes because people do change their minds. People are influenced by new information that's presented to them. It's a availability bias. Like one of the reasons he believes the things he believes is because that's what's available to him. So presenting new information usually is not going to change somebody's mind in the moment in this way. Like you show them a thing, like you show them the chart, like, hey, Newsmax is like not as reliable, or like, I know you saw this story, but here, let me show you another story that says like the opposite thing. Doesn't this seem more reasonable? Usually that conversation is not going to end up with that person being like, you know what? You're right. And I was totally wrong. Like people don't like to admit their mistakes, especially immediately. However, if you can like be gracious about presenting new information, like ask with curiosity, like where they got the information from, and then present it in like a kind manner, that has a higher likelihood of changing their minds or softening their position, even without them quite realizing it later. So like the next time, say they posted a false thing and he said, actually, I read this other article that says that thing is not true, but you're kind about it. The next time they come across that information, they are less likely to reshare it. This happened on the Algerian boxer Facebook thing. Like I saw somebody post this thing And then 9 out of the 10 comments were like, yeah, I can't believe they let a man punch that woman, just agreeing. And then one person was like, if you look at the facts of the case, this is not true. Here's a link. And the person who posted it was like, huh, that's the first time I heard that. I'll look into it. Happens. Okay. Somebody said, why didn't you mention that Tim Walz was one of the people who spread the JD Vance disinformation? Interesting. I feel free to say more about that. From what I am familiar with, I believe his reference to JD Walls was that I think he said in one of his early speeches, I'll debate JD Vance. He's just got to get up off this couch to do it or whatever. And it wasn't, as far as I'm aware, it wasn't explicit spreading of that rumor, but it was sort of like a you know lowbrow acknowledgement of the existence of that joke online, which I think is totally inappropriate. Yeah, I don't think our elected leaders should do that. And I mean, that's my personal opinion. But if there's anything more about that I missed, like him spreading that online, then please bring it to my attention. If he did, that would be totally inappropriate. All right. It's 6 o'clock. My, how time flies. Let's see. So there aren't stories about Trump's cognitive decline because they're questions rather than answers. Yeah, like you'd want you don't just want conjecture. You don't just want like you don't want people just raising questions. You want to demand evidence. When that's when things will make a jump from really partisan media to more reputable, higher editorial quality media sources, is when there's evidence instead of conjecture. All right. If you have any more questions, please email us at info@adfontesmedia.com. One thing I'll point you to as just a last bit. Sorry for the the pauses at the beginning, but we've got a website and an app, a free mobile app. If you can just download this app, you can search any of the 3,000 news sources that we've rated that are on our interactive media bias chart for free. It's a limit of 5 per day. It's like a hard limit there. But you can search any individual one, whereas on our website, you can't search all of them. You can search only 5, and then there's also further limits. So use this during the election. Tell your friends and family about it. And thanks for your time and attention tonight. We'll send out the recording to you. Feel free to share. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.